Welcome back, Pod People. Today, my guest is Fred Vogel, the director of The Final Interview and August Underground and a bunch of other movies. So, Fred, I first found out about your work through the August Underground trilogy, which I suspect is how a lot of people have found out about your films. But the most recent one of yours that I've watched is The Final Interview, which I believe is your most recent movie. Came out in, I want to say, 2018. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So The Final Interview is a really interesting, sort of fitting a trend of movies that I've interviewed people about, where there's a little bit of a framing device that takes place outside of the main set, but then almost all of the movie is a conversation between a few different characters in a single room. It reminds me of Black Pool, which I interviewed the director of, and Solid Rock Trust, which I also interviewed the director of on here earlier. So I'm curious to hear what it is that motivated that sort of framing device and setting, because usually I find that when people create such a focused location for their film, it's largely a budgetary thing. But in this case, it really looked like you filmed inside of an actual prison, and I can't imagine that would be cheap.
I absolutely filmed inside an actual prison. I'm very lucky out here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have some pretty awesome prisons. And, David Fincher's Mindhunter was shot at the prison that I shot The Final Interview in.
Oh.
So they were actually off on season 2, and my wife ended up just getting that location for us, which was kind of a steal for us. But getting that location of the prison was cost more than my first 2 movies put together budget wise. But it made the movie look like $1 million. If I didn't have that prison, it would have the movie wouldn't look as authentic. Even though I had my production designer building everything. Where before we had the location locked down, we were trying to make like fake walls and things like that. But then, we were able to secure the prison, and it really just gave it that look. But pretty much the whole movie is on a set. So that's, where the interview takes place is all on a set. That is not in the prison. But anytime you see him like moving around or people walking around the big hall, the hallways and corridors, that's all set in the Greensburg prison.
Okay. And the bathroom scene, was that in the prison?
No, that was actually at Pittsburgh's Yellow Cab, our taxi cab place that we have here in the city. So like when you see the cab in the beginning of the film, you see the cab come into what looks like the underbellows of the prison. That's actually Yellow Cab. And they had this awesome bathroom with this amazing sink. And, I had to write it in,
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, but as you were saying about like having such a minimal location and things like that, it was definitely budgetary.
Okay.
When I came up with The Final Interview, I just found out that I lost the funding to a bigger project that I was working on, and I had to think of something because at the time it was like 6 years since I made my last film. And, I wanted to kind of show the money people that backed out on me that, I can make anything. Like, don't, just because, I'm known for making the August Underground movies doesn't mean I can't bring, seasoned actors to a project or anything like that. So it was kind of my way of, shoving it up their ass and being like, I can do anything. And
yeah,
but sometimes you have to really think about what you have, and I really like the idea of 2 people having this cat and mouse debate with each other, and who is the bad guy? Who do you really think is the bad guy? Is it the interviewer or the guy on death row?
Yeah, that was interesting. Talking about seasoned actors, I noticed the SAG-AFTRA logo at the end of the credits, and that surprised me because most of the independent films that I watch are not union productions. And I confess I didn't really look for it when watching any of your other films, but I don't think those were Is
Not at
this your
all.
first? Is this your first time?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
This was my first SAG picture.
All right. How did that change the experience of filmmaking?
A lot actually. You know, every movie that I make, I always try to grow and learn. Um, and you know, the last toe tag picture, Sella Turcica, that I made in 2010 was the first time we brought a movie star into. We had Camille Keaton from the original I Spit on Your Grave,
Oh,
and I took
it's a great movie.
more of a dramatic route with the storytelling with that, because that's really where I think, you know, for me personally, where horror sticks the best is when there's a dramatic story and you put in these really graphic, violent scenes. I think that's where horror really sticks to it. And that's really the direction that I like to go with my career. And the final interview was no different. I knew that I needed to have some really great actors, and if I can only, setting the movie with just pretty much two people, possibly three, maybe I can afford getting these actors and getting these, paying the SAG fees and all the stuff that I'd never done before. And I was
Yeah.
very fortunate to have a really great producer, Ross Putman, who was from Los Angeles, and he really believed in me and he believed in the project, and he was able to help me, lock down Granger Hines and Diane Franklin, for the movie. So I was very excited to have those people on there. I mean, Granger Hines worked with Steven Spielberg, and now he's working with the guy who made August Underground. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, and Granger Hines is the reporter.
Yes, he is.
Okay, yeah, he did a great job.
Yeah.
He did a really as someone who used to be a functional alcoholic, I saw myself in a lot of those scenes, and it was difficult to watch, but powerfully performed.
Yes. I mean, Granger was so amazing to work with and such a professional. And of course, Damian Marusak, who plays Darius Hidman, the killer. He's been in a few of my films. He's kind of like my Robert De Niro. I've used him in a bunch of stuff because I just really believe in him and I believe in his talent. And, a lot of actors would be a little worried about working with somebody who isn't a professional, so to say. But Granger and Damian, I was lucky to have 3 days of rehearsal time with both of them, and they were able to work with each other. And the movie's a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, no kidding.
For those actors to come in and we only shot the movie in 9 days, so those guys really knew that script. It was really amazing watching them work. It was almost like shooting a play.
Yeah, I can see that. There's for most of the movie, there's no like real blocking. They're sitting down at a table and stationary, and then we cut away to a close-up of the I don't know the word for her profession, but the person who is
she's the producer and the director of the show.
Okay, yeah.
So she's in the truck working, and that's the funny thing is, like, when I first came up with the idea, that character didn't exist. It wasn't until my writing partner Rebecca Swan, who wrote the screenplay, she brought in that character. And I remember it was reading the script for the first time with the Rhonda character and being like, oh man, now I need to find another actor. And it's going to cost me more money. But that's the thing that I love about Rebecca is, she always kind of like pushes me to like take that next step where, not that I was trying to take the easy way out. I was just thinking budgetary reasons of how to make this myself. And, but I was so glad to get Diane Franklin. She is one of my favorite actors from the 80s, and somebody who I admired and loved in The Last American Virgin and, Better Off Dead. She's just so iconic to me as an 80s beauty.
Yeah, she did a great job. Really got the tension and emotion and the sort of ambivalence of like resenting the person she's working with, but wanting to make a good show with him. So I thought it worked very well.
Yeah, it's her ex-husband. She knows him better than anybody else, and the dynamic is great between the two of them, and she also helps propel the story. But again, so you're like, if you're not getting it, or if you're like losing yourself with so much dialogue, she's the one that kind of like, hey guys, remember, this is what's really going on. So it needed that. And of course, jumping from a cinematic look to watching the video. Watching the video is something that
Yeah.
also helped. Break up the two heads just talking to each other.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of the video parts, so that's you're referring to the parts where we see the broadcast or we see them, cut away to a different part of
Yes.
the broadcast. Uh, so this is sort of a period piece. It looks like it was set in the 80s or 90s, but I'm not sure that was made explicit.
No, it's set in the 80s.
Okay.
And everything from the costume design to production design, the vehicles, everything. I don't like putting dates on things. I want
Okay.
I want to do my job as a director and creator to like give you the visual of the period. So the movie takes place in 1983. And you can tell that from the phones they use to their outfits and everything. But yeah, I wanted to give it that look in that Pittsburgh 80s movie look. So like when I had my colorist, do the color for the film, I had him watch movies like Flashdance and All the Right Moves. A lot of those movies that were shot in Pittsburgh in the early 80s.
All right. Yeah. So tell me a bit about why you chose to make it set in the 80s as opposed to a contemporary thing. Because I think this story could have happened I mean, I guess it couldn't have happened like too long ago. Well, actually, no, it could have because there was still live broadcasts back in the 70s and 60s and stuff. But it also could have happened in the present day with really very little change.
Yeah, well, it was a challenge. I wanted to try to find period cars, and I wanted to try to find period clothes, and I wanted that early videotape feel.
Okay.
The commercials from the 80s. That are in the movie, things like that. I looked at it more as a challenge.
Okay.
Than just doing something that was just modern time. That's the era that I grew up in. So I like making stuff that has a little bit more season to it than something super glossy like we're living in today.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to take a guess here and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to guess that all of your films were shot on digital and then you made them look like they were like this looks like it was shot on a combination of film and video.
Yes.
But I'm going to guess that was done in post-production. Is that true for all of your films, shot on digital and then post-production?
Yes, shot on video or shot on digital. Always, of course, when I first started making movies, I really wished I was shooting on film. But it was right at the end of that world. And,
Yeah.
it was always, as an artist, video allows me to do so much. It allows me to manipulate the image and give it a look that I can give it, and from as a painter and sculptor, which I am, using this medium is awesome because I can make things look gritty. I can make them look cinematic. I can make it look, any way that I want to look. And it's really hard to get that with film. So,
Yeah.
as much as I wanted to work on film back in the day, I'm so glad that I work in the new digital medium because it allows me to do so much more.
Yeah. And when you say shot on video, you mean shot on digital video, like not shot on like
Well, the
literal.
August Underground movies were shot on videotape.
Oh, really?
They were shot on like mini DV tapes or high 8 tapes. Even like the Redson Tower, they were all shot on tape, digital. Then I think Celatriska was the first one we did digitally. But the final interview was shot on the Black Magic cameras.
Okay. Blackmagic, Pocket Cinema.
Yes.
Nice. I've heard good things.
Is what they're nice little cameras. But the thing is you have to know how to light it. And I was so lucky to have such an amazing crew. It was very minimal, but they were all professionals, and lighting it was that gave me the opportunity to bring it to my colorist and him to really make it look good. Because I remember when I took it to my colorist, he couldn't believe that I shot it on the Black Magic. He's just like, this looks amazing. And he's like, everything I always see, it kind of looks a little cheap. And I'm like, well, I had a really great cinematographer and, all the people doing all the grip and electric work was, top notch. They really made the movie look awesome. They knew that I was trying to give it this 80s style, so they prepared for that, lighting wise.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of movies that are made in the modern day, but and shot on digital video, but are set in the 80s and try to make it look like they were shot on film. And this is definitely one of the more successful ones in terms of actually making it look like it was shot on film. So good job with that.
Thank you. I've been pretty successful with making a lot of my movies look like the way they're supposed to look.
Yeah, I think you.
It's like with the August Underground films, like nothing looks more real than those movies. Trying to look like
Indeed.
old videotape. But I had to be creative. I don't use a filter. I find ways to be an artist and experiment with things and record over footage and do things to give it that aesthetic.
Oh, that's interesting. Recording over footage. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a cool idea.
Well, for the August Underground movies, like those, I would take that was shot on a really nice camera, but we would take it and record it onto an old VHS tape and then record it onto an old VHS tape and output it and record it onto an older tape to really give it that look. And, nowadays it's a click of a button and it puts a filter on there, or the grindhouse look where it has lines going through it. And, a lot of that stuff just looks amateurish. And, I always try to be more creative.
Nice. So you mentioned earlier how the final interview has a much larger budget than your earlier works. Would you mind putting some specific numbers on that?
Yeah, it was less than a Ferrari, and more
I
than
don't know how much a Ferrari costs, but
yeah,
okay.
less than $100,000.
Okay.
But more than
more than
1,000.
Okay. Yeah. That's almost everyone I interview. That is the exact range that their work falls in. So
yeah, and especially like trying to find money. Like everything. The movies that I make have all been self-financed, and you don't want to lose money for people. That's a hard thing about making movies. Is like getting budgets together and getting people their investments back. It's always such a hard thing. And nowadays, now that everybody steals movies and, even for the final interview, we put together these really beautiful Blu-rays with the soundtrack and the DVD, and it comes in a Criterion case. And I mean, they're stunning, but still, putting a $50 price tag on there, even though it's worth that, some people are like, oh, I don't want to spend that much money. Where can I download? Where can I steal it for free? Where can I watch it for free? Because we live in this new world where everything is streaming and everything is kind of free. And that really hurts the independent artists. So it's really tough for us, independent filmmakers, to make our money back. So we have to try to keep our budgets down low, but not make it look cheap.
Right. So I'm curious about that because definitely selling a DVD or a Blu-ray is going to be the highest profit margin for you. But most of the people that I talk with are also pretty enthusiastic about distributing online through streaming services, doing something like Film Hub, getting it up on Tubi, since you mentioned places that people can watch things for free.
Yeah.
And I don't think you've done that at all. Is that right?
No. I'm old school. And I'm a collector of cinema, and I like having physical copies. I'm a guy with a record collection. I'm a guy with a movie collection. I love having that physical media, and it's just that I like streaming too. Believe me, I watch a lot of my stuff too. I stream as well. I have Netflix and I have HBO Max and all those channels. But for me, giving the fans something that they can have and enjoy. All my films have always been very collectible. And the final interview is the same way. There's only 1,983 copies of the final interview, 1983. So if once those are gone, you don't get them, and then you're going to be paying $400 like you do with my August Underground films or any of my other films. Like, if you miss out, you miss out, and unfortunately, that's the way it is. So I really encourage people to, to buy the physical copy, because it does come with autographs. It does come with all these special things that are my gifts to the fans of my work, where you don't get that with streaming. It's,
Yeah.
with all of my films, I had to go out there and promote and meet people and shake hands and, be a carnival barker to promote my art. With streaming, it's just like, let me throw it up there, and it's just one of those things that you're pressing and you're scanning, and it goes by, there's an image, and maybe I'll click on that.
Yeah.
Where out when I was going out and doing conventions and doing screenings, it just made it more personal to sit there and talk to somebody about my film, and then let them take it home and be like, wow, I met the director, and now this is really cool, and I didn't expect this from this underground movie or this independent film. Making independent films and underground movies, like, they're either really great or they're really bad. But us people who love those kind of movies are willing to take that chance. And I've been doing this for over 20 years, so I kind of hope that people could have some trust of the art that I'm giving them.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely relate to what you're saying about like going to conventions and talking directly with people. I own a small publishing company. I publish like tabletop role-playing games, and I'm a big fan of physical books that I can put on my shelf and keep forever. But I just have to sell ebooks in order for most of my audience to be willing to buy something.
Sure.
And yeah, and like I purchased the download of the final interview, in large part because that's the quickest way to get it. But yeah, I don't actually have a large physical media collection aside from books myself. It's an interesting world, certainly very different from the days of like the video stores all over the place.
Yeah.
And then that in turn is quite different from the decades before that, when there was effectively no home media at all.
Yeah.
So it's interesting seeing what things people focus on as being important to them artistically.
Yeah. It's, of course, I grew up in the 80s going to video stores, and couldn't wait to Friday night to go to the video store, hoping that the movie that I wanted was still on the shelf. And it's, unfortunately, that's lost. And that
Yeah.
but the family dynamic is also lost these days. You know what I mean? Like, now it's just like you let your kids just watch whatever. They're, don't even, parents are doing their own thing. They're all looking at their phone, looking at their own shit on Amazon all day long, while the kid's looking at whatever he wants to look at. But back in the day, it was like, all right, as a family, we're going to go rent these movies. Maybe we'll get one for the kids, and they'll watch that later after the parents go to bed. They can watch their horror movie or their titties comedies or whatever they wanted to see. Hopefully, just like anything, everything comes in cycles, and maybe one day the video store will be back in some sort of new way. But as of right now, at least for me, I want to be able to know that my fans are getting my art from me. Fred
Yeah.
packed, he packed out those movies with the discs and everything. Like, that was me in my basement with my wife, like, sliding these 3 discs into this packaging and putting our cover in there and signing all the stuff, and it just makes it a little bit more special.
Yeah.
And I love that. But that's the way that I grew up. It's like, back in the day, on any kind of underground art, you knew you were getting was from the artist, and that was just so cool. It's just so much more personal. And now kids today are, I'm finding out that I have a whole new generation of fans, which is really, really cool. 15-year-old kids are writing me and being like, oh, I just discovered the August Underground films, and they don't even know that I made any other movies. So, I try to educate them on, check this out, but maybe you want to check this movie out too. Your August Underground movies are too sick for me. I don't know what else to watch. Well, maybe you can try to find this one. Unfortunately, a lot of my movies are out of print right now, and you can't get them. So right now, it just keeps building the mystique around me as a filmmaker. It's like, oh, I really like to get a Fred Vogel movie, but they're just so hard to get, and I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
they shouldn't be that accessible.
Yeah, that's certainly an interesting way of going about it. A lot of the people I've talked with are really going sort of the other direction, trying to make their stuff as easy to find as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly the August Underground trilogy has a mystique around it.
Yeah.
So
good.
I was going to say, going back to the final interview, and don't worry about spoilers. This podcast is totally full of spoilers. It is meant to be listened to after you see the film. So
don't give a spoiler for the ending. We can talk about it in different ways, but don't give a spoiler to the ending. Yeah, I've been so lucky.
Okay.
Nobody spoiled the ending, because the ending is, it does kind of come up in a surprise, so we can kind of talk around it.
Okay. That was specifically what I was about to talk about. So you caught me just in time.
I'll catch you.
Well, that definitely cuts out the question I was going to ask.
But did you see the ending coming? Let me ask you the question.
I predicted that something similar to the ending would happen, but I did not predict what actually happened.
Yeah. So, that's the whole thing, with this whole movie, I kind of lead you down a path. There's some red herrings that are out there that kind of, I want the viewer to be like, okay, this is how this is going to end. And I remember when Rebecca came up with the first draft of the script, she came up with the ending that you probably thought was going to happen. And I wrote to her.
Once we stop recording, I want you to tell me what the original one was.
For sure. But once I read that ending, I'm like, of course, when she's written a lot of Hollywood movies, and she comes from that Hollywood world. And I told her, I'm like, we have to remember, this is a Fred Vogel film. There is no happy endings. There are no cliche traditional endings. We need to do something that is a little bit more natural to violence. I take violence very serious in all of my films, and anytime that I show violence, I want it to look and to be and feel as real as possible, in everything. And I mean, even like with some of the dialogue in the final interview, like they're not allowed to go into the prison and have pens and clipboards and things like that. They're able to use those as weapons. All that stuff was researched and studied. I remember how my wife Shelby, who's the producer on the film, she really researched and found out all the stuff that you're allowed to take in there. And it was really important for her. She's like, Fred, you need to put that in there. Like, we need to put those pieces in there about what you can and what you cannot take inside a prison. And I'm glad that she did, because that also helps with the ending.
Yeah. That was one of the things that definitely got me thinking about how the movie was going to end, was that early on scene where the guy's like, oh, I need to take this pen with me. It's my special lucky pen.
Yeah.
So something that I found really interesting about the scene that had violence in it is it was much less explicit than I would sort of expect from you.
Yeah.
There was some artful shots with furniture obscuring part of the view and things like that. So tell me a bit about the decision to film it that way.
So, this is my first non-toe tag movie. And, one of the things that makes a toe tag movie is my business partner, Jeremy Cruz, who is a masterful special effects artist. I'm not too shabby myself. That's how I got into the business. As I was a special effects artist, and I've done effects for movies as well. But I knew going into this film that I really wanted to do something different and not highlight the special effects. I wanted to really make a serious movie, more of a thriller. And but I also knew that, I need to, it's a Fred Vogel movie, so there needs to be a little bit of that red stuff in there. So it's a fine line of where do you go and how do you show it. And once we found that location where the ending takes place, that big giant sink, it was just like, this, I can use this so much. And if in the scene, everything from it coming on and the drain and how the water spews from the sink, it's a character. It's just not a piece of set dressing.
Right.
And blocking some of the viscera was was just a way to, like, again, keep it not so brutal, even though it is brutal. Like the end shot of the movie is a man not doing too well, but it was important for me just to not be so graphic.
Okay.
That's too easy. Again, this is it's all about challenging myself as an artist. I get people ask me all the time, like, Fred, you should make like a Friday the 13th, like a slasher movie. And I'm just like, that is so easy. That's like 1 + 1, like, I want some trigonometry. I want to really challenge myself and try something different, because that's how I believe you grow as an artist. It's easy for me to do blood gags and splatter, but trying to tell a story and, to have you as a viewer use your imagination, like you create books, and you're using your imagination. Now everything is so plot driven and shoved down your throat. You don't use your imagination because it's all handed to you. It's just like, here's this buffet of everything, and you're not even really tasting it. So with the final interview, like telling the stories of how Tidman killed his father and going to the house and all that stuff, like, I know I've talked to many people who've watched my film are like, man, I saw it. Like, I saw him jumping on this woman's head. I saw him, cutting up his father. Like, I saw him painting the walls with the, blood red. And that just goes to show, like, I'm doing better as a storyteller and in making something more dramatic and not relying on what I'm normally good at, which is, spraying blood everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely say that, like, the convicted killer's descriptions were very evocative. And I believe at one point you said that horror movies should never be PG-13. This movie, and I believe all of your movies are unrated.
Unrated, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I don't know, having read, where you said that horror movies should never be PG-13, and then seeing how relatively tame the violence in this was in terms of what's explicitly shown, it felt almost contradictory there. And have your thoughts on that changed at all, or?
No, I mean, a PG-13 movie can't have as many fucks as the final interview has.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And when I mean that, yes, it is a little bit, it is tamer and less nihilistic as a lot of my other movies. The violence in my other work is very brutal. You know what I mean? It's very, very brutal. Where there is, there is a scene in the final interview that is brutal, but it's not, there's not multiple scenes like that. And I'm telling you, the characters are telling you about the other murders, so that softens the blow a little bit. But it's very much like, if I was part of the MPAA, I would totally give the movie an R rating just off of the dialogue and the way that the characters are speaking to each other, and the subject matter that they're discussing.
Yeah. And it's not being put out by a major studio, which always pushes up the rating a bit.
Yeah. But I mean, again, this is something that, this was the first movie my mother watched. fully.
Oh my goodness.
And
I can't imagine showing any of these to my
yeah,
mother.
and she was, she was so proud because she was able to like watch this movie and be like, oh, this is finally I can watch a movie my son made where I'm not like, oh my God, Fred, what are you doing? So that was really important for me. And it was really important for me too, to like, for some of the people who really like what I do or like me as a person, but they are so intimidated by my art and my previous films, where now they can watch it. And now they could be like, oh, this is something I can watch, and this is really great. But I'm not like squirming or ready to throw up from watching, girls vomit on each other or nipples being cut off.
Right. Um, so there is one specific special effect from uh, August Underground Penance that I'm really curious about, which is when they're sort of like dissecting the body. Um, and the organs in that, were those like actual animal organs, or were
Yes.
those okay?
Yes.
I thought so.
Yeah. I come from the Tom Savini School of Special Effects. I actually used to teach at Tom Savini's makeup school back right before I made August Underground. And Tom Savini is one of my friends and one of my heroes. And growing up watching Day of the Dead with real intestines coming out, nothing looks better. Tom says it himself. Nothing looks better than real guts. And I was fortunate enough to know a slaughterhouse in New Jersey, and I was able to get the guts for my film. So like anytime we use intestines, it's usually real animal intestines for sure.
Yeah. I'm guessing pig.
Yeah,
Oh,
either pig or goat.
okay. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, the two movies that scene reminded me of on sort of opposite ends of the how horrifying is it spectrum are The Wizard of Gore and Men Behind the Sun. Have you seen
Yeah,
either of those?
absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, the August Underground movies are impactful, but I don't think anything's ever going to freak me out as much as Men Behind the Sun.
Well, I remember seeing Men Behind the Sun when it first came out on
Oh, yeah.
videotape, and the scene with the girl's arms come, they pull the skin
Yeah.
off, and a lot of that stuff was really powerful back then because you never seen anything like that.
Yeah. Well,
And
for that,
especially being Asian, you know what I mean? So us as Americans, we're kind of like, whoa, what the fuck are we watching here? This is a little different than what we normally see on American movies or television. So
yeah. And I believe for that specific shot that you were just talking about with the girl's arms get frozen and then
yep.
hot water gets poured on them, they filmed that shot using an actual corpse's arms that were really frozen. And similarly, the vivisection of a child later on is an actual autopsy of a real child. So goat and pig guts definitely bump up the reality a bit, but not quite as much as an actual human corpse does.
No actual human corpse, even though they might look real in my movies. They're all made of rubber.
Yeah. So the final interview is much more normal in terms of like plot structure and everything than the August Underground films are. I'm curious if you could talk a bit about what it was that back in the August Underground films were the first films you made, right?
August Underground was my first film, yeah.
Okay. So what was it that motivated you to make such an unusual film back then, and what has changed since then that's making you want to make something that has a more traditional, like it's not found footage, it's not like it has more real, more normally presented characters. Tell me about that change as an artist.
So I'm a cinephile. I love movies, all kinds of movies. I've always been drawn to horror movies. When I realized that I wanted to not just be a special effects artist and I wanted to be a filmmaker, being, living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you're inspired by George Romero and Tom Savini, and filmmakers like that. And, I wanted to make a zombie movie, and I kind of wanted to like put my own stamp on it. But unfortunately, the budget for a zombie movie was a lot bigger than what I could afford at the time. But I knew with my special effects background that I could do something a little bit scaled down. So doing a movie about a serial killer interests me,
Yeah.
especially because at the time when I was teaching, a lot of my students were writing the serial killers. And I just thought it was kind of fucked up to where, these, of course, where a lot of us are fascinated by what serial killers do and what in the mindset of somebody, why would you do something like that? But to praise them enough to write letters and to get letters back as part of like a cool card, I just didn't think was that cool. And I blame a lot of that on our media and how we, you know, we see these kind of people. Like, what if that was your mother that was murdered? Or what if that was your brother or sister that was murdered by these people? How'd you feel if I hung a picture of a drawing on the wall or something? I couldn't tell you how many people, when you're the creator of August Underground, people come out of the woodwork, or Fred, I got this Richard Ramirez artwork letter or a Gacy painting, or and I want to give it to you, and I'm just like, no thank you, I don't want that bad juju in my house. Because that's really what it is. You know what I mean? It's just like I don't find it cool. Yes, I'm fascinated by the minds that would do something like that, but to the point to like celebrate it, I'm not about.
I'm guessing you have a similar attitude towards the sort of true crime phenomenon that's really caught on in the last few years, to how I feel about it, which is that it's not as good as the fictional crime.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's like nowadays there's everywhere you turn there's something about killers or serial killers on television, and like the Gacy tapes or the Bundy tapes, and
That Dahmer miniseries.
yeah, and I've watched all that stuff because again I watch everything. I'm watching it to see how the director directed it, and the actors, their performances, and I look at the big picture and not just the small picture.
Okay.
But going back to why I did it was again, like my students were writing these serial killers, and I knew that I needed to do something to show. I wanted to show serial killers in a negative light. I really wanted to show like how awful these people are.
Yeah.
And it was really important for me to show it, like, especially the characters being at the age I was when I made August Underground, which is like 24, 23, 24 years old, and how fun and dumb they were, and how it's, how these people literally started off as like thrill killing, where they're like, maybe killing animals at first and taking steps up and beating people up, and then it escalates to the next thing and escalates to the next thing, and next thing murder is actually happening, and that's kind of how it all really starts. And that was, I discovered all that through reading and the research and studying, these serial killers that I did for a while before I made August Underground. In 2000, in the early 2000, late 90s, early 2000, movies shot on video looked cheap. And I remember, being kind of bummed out that I knew that I had to make my movie on videotape because I knew it wasn't going to look good. But my partner in crime at the time, Alan Peters, who was the cameraman in August Underground, he was just like, we can work on this and really try to make it look bad. And that's what we did. We shot it on a nice camera, but in the editing process, we really made it look like degraded videotape. So it didn't look so clean like the more modern, or at the time, movies shot on video looked. And it really gave this aesthetic and the cinema verite look that nobody really did at the time. The only other found footage movie prior to kind of, kick up some dust was the Blair Witch Project that came out in 1999. August Underground was shot in 2000 and came out in 2001. So we were right on the coattail of that. And I was inspired by Ed and the Blair Witch guys on how they marketed the film. So when I made August Underground, I wanted to like drop tapes off in like, playgrounds in the police station. I wanted them to come find me. Like in the movie, I have my hair dyed black. And then like when the movie was over, I went back to being my natural color, and I put on a little bit more weight for the movie, and like wanted to look different.
Yeah.
And because in my head at the time, I'm like, I want to be on Entertainment Tonight as the guy that fooled everybody thinking that there was this real snuff movie out there. But unfortunately, 9/11 happened. And our country was under severe lock and key. And, it was advised by me to not do things like that because I wouldn't be going to jail for the day. I might be going to jail for a while because of trying to do something like that. Because there was the anthrax scare. There was all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
So it kind of took my whole marketing and changed everything completely. So that's kind of how it all started.
Yeah. So you've mentioned that you filmed it on a really high quality camera.
Yeah, it was a Canon XL1.
Why? Given that you were going to degrade the footage so much, why not just shoot it on like a consumer grade camera?
Well, it's because that was the best camera at the time, and like as filmmakers, we wanted the best camera at the time. August Underground wasn't the only movie we wanted to make. We wanted to make other stuff.
Right. You're purchasing equipment that you can keep using. Okay, that makes sense.
So, Alan was making his short films, and then I was pushing to make the movie. Right. So like at the time, Alan Peters, who's the cameraman in August Underground, he was making, we were shooting all different kinds of stuff. We were practicing and using the camera and doing all different kinds of projects to just kind of get better at the craft. And but then August Underground was going to be the movie that we were going to do.
Yeah. I think the creepiest scene in August Underground to me is when they go to Roadside America, because just seeing these people that like, the horrible things that they have done and are going to do, it made me feel the sense of threat towards all of the like completely unsuspecting people around them.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really effective thing to include in the film.
Yeah. And that just happened because we were on the way that we were coming back from New Jersey. So we shot the movie in Pittsburgh, most of it, when where I was living. And then we shot a few scenes. We shot the convenience store scene in New Jersey. We shot the scene with the religious statues, the scene with my grandmother. We shot a few scenes, and on the way back, there's Roadside America is one of the things you see on the highway. So I'm like, let's go in there, let's go in there and see what we can do.
Did you get permission to film in there, or did you just steal a shot?
Not at all. We just went in.
Oh,
and it was really amazing. It was our first time seeing it. And I remember after like the camera turned off and just being like, wow, this place is really cool. And it was funny because it was really religious. So they would play like the Star Spangled Banner in there, and then they would like you hear like Jesus's voice, and they did all different kinds of stuff in there, and we just thought it was so interesting, and so many little parts making all the little cars move and people walk around, and I mean I just thought it was really, really cool. Unfortunately, it's no longer there.
Oh, it isn't?
No, it's no longer there.
Oh,
but now it lives forever. Now it lives forever in August Underground. So
that's true. It's preserved forever on digital video.
Yeah.
I wonder what the creators of it would think about being preserved in that way.
Who knows if they even know? I'm sure some fans probably popped in there, and was like, "Oh, this is where they shot August Underground." But you never know. You never know, and again, it was just, that it was such guerrilla filmmaking. That movie, the August Underground movies are, pure guerrilla, independent filmmaking. So we had to do what we had to do because there was really no money to do anything else. We had the money that we had to go towards the fake blood and the other, or the camera or the tapes or whatever. Not to us for sure. It was definitely to make the movie.
Yeah. I have a guess as to sort of the range that the budget was in. I'm guessing it was somewhere between like $1,000 and $5,000.
For the first one?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, the first one was made for around $1,500. And
nice.
that's because I broke a door at the convenience store when I put my brother's head through the glass. And that cost me $600.
Oh my goodness.
Everything else was the tapes and the blood. Nobody got paid. Everybody kind of did it as a favor.
Yeah,
Um, and gas or whatever. But that's really what it cost.
yeah. Um, so your films, both your really older stuff and the final interview, have sort of detestable protagonists. And I've something that I've been thinking about a lot when watching movies, especially horror movies, is that typically the filmmakers want us to like the main characters, or in the case of horror movies, it can also be fine for us to hate the main characters because then we want to see them get killed.
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting how that's all sort of subverted with your movies, in that, like, in the August Underground movies, we don't like, we hate the main characters, but they'd never get a comeuppance.
No.
And in the final interview, I started off liking the main character, and then my feelings about him became more complicated as the movie went on. Uh, but it was still very, despite being structured more like a mainstream film, I found the characterization to be pretty different. And so I'm curious if you could talk about both the decisions that you make to make these sort of unlikable or more complex protagonists, in your more recent stuff, um, and also like what techniques you use to evoke the feelings from the audience that you want to evoke about the characters.
Um, you know, Realism is really important to me in all my films.
I can tell.
And there's some really nasty people out there, and I don't like, I'm always trying to reinvent the wheel as best as I can when it comes to my films and everything that I do. Like
Okay.
August Underground is a serial killer movie. There's been hundreds of serial killer movies, but there's not really many like August Underground.
Yeah, the only one that comes to mind is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
For sure, and which was a huge inspiration for me. Um, you know, that movie was such an amazing film, and especially uh, the home invasion scene in Henry was something that I showed to the actors. Was like, all right, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. Like
Yeah,
I wanted to look this real.
yeah,
What if there is a 90-minute movie that looked like this? That was kind of like the catalyst for August Underground.
yeah,
Um, and the same thing with all my films and all the characters. I'm always trying to tell a different story, and sometimes flipping the script and not making you like the main character is what helps tell a different story. And it makes you as the viewer think differently about all the situations, because now you're not going into caring about somebody as much because you already detest them. And the same thing with Oliver Ross. Like the first thing he says, he's right off the bat. First thing he says is somebody's going to die tonight. So that gets your brain moving. Okay, it's not going to be. It's not going to be this guy. It's because he's the guy telling the story. And then all of a sudden you start watching the movie, or the same thing with my film, The Redson Tower. You have like this love story that changes, and it's like the boyfriend he's the victim, but wait a minute, what is he doing? Now he's hurting now he's the bad guy. So I'm always trying to figure out and try different things just to obscure your viewing experience for the film. And I take pride in that. I really take pride in just kind of altering the universe, because we've all seen the same shit so many times. How do you make people like? I hope when, and I get this a lot. People are like, "Man, Fred, I watched one of your movies, and we just talked about it the rest of the night. Like, did you see this coming? Did you feel? Oh, I can't believe they did this or this." That's what I want. How many times do you watch a movie and it's like, okay, that's over, next one, bloop, and it's out of your mind already, because it's the same regurgitated shit with the same formula that you see all the time. And yeah, that sells and that gets asses in the seats, but it doesn't keep the lingering effect of the art staying true. People are talking about August Underground 20 years later off a $1,500 movie that I made with my friends, on weekends when I was teaching. People are talking about all my other films because they're different, and they make you think, they make you wonder, they make you question the violence and the storytelling. Where you watch a $30 million film that has major actors and explosions and shit, and right out of your head, who cares? Next thing.
30 million is pretty low budget for a modern Hollywood film.
Yeah, but that's really that's how it is. And again, I have a different approach to movie making, because I'm always hungry to make the next movie. Like I haven't been fortunate enough to have Hollywood throw down $30 million and say, "Hey, Fred, make something." I have to go out there and hunt for my food. I have to go out there and create and try to raise money and put together the team and find these actors and work with them and put my blood, sweat, and tears into everything that I make. And then once it's finished, I got to go out there and push that big giant rock of the movie up a hill just so people can see it. So it's a little different. It's a little different.
What would you make if Hollywood came to you and gave you $30 million?
Oh, I mean, I have a lot of projects that I'm working on. I have like a lot of, a lot of things on the pot right now. I have my Frankenstein movie, which I'm hoping is going to be my next film. I have a project called Pittsburgh Body Removal that I'd love to either do as a feature film or do as a series. I'm a huge wrestling fan. I have a wrestling movie that I'd really like to do that talks about like the old school, right before the Hulk Hogan era of wrestling. So I mean, I have a lot of stuff, and more money just gives me more opportunity to get bigger stars and not have to worry about. You could throw money at problems.
Yeah.
So in my day job, I work in the motion picture union. So I work on big studio pictures. I've done the Tom Hanks, A Man Called Otto was one of my most recent movies. I've worked on, television show, Mayor of Kingstown with Jeremy Renner, things like that. I see how Hollywood just throws money at things. And, when you don't have that opportunity, when you don't have that, you really have to be creative and, use the two nickels you have to rub together to make something special. So I'm hoping if I ever have the opportunity to make something that big, I use the money wisely and put it to where it really needs to go.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine actually spending $30 million on a movie without just resorting to throwing money at problems to make them go away a lot.
It really comes. It's really more people. That's really the thing, is you're paying more people. For like on my movie, I hire a production designer. That's one person. That person, if they're lucky, maybe has somebody help them. On a major motion picture, you have a production designer, you have your set dressers, you have your decorator. The list is huge just for one department.
You're right.
And that's where a lot of that money's spent. Because like me as a set dresser on a major motion picture, they still have to pay me a lot of money to do what I do. So you can only imagine what, and that's even on the lower end. Just imagine when you're above the line and how much money you're making there.
Yeah.
So, stunt team or anything like that. I mean, there's lots of money being spent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's That's interesting, and I'm really curious to see how you would do a Frankenstein movie because, uh, like the old James Whale Frankenstein films, especially Bride of Frankenstein, those are some of my favorite horror films.
Yeah, it's my Frankenstein is my favorite movie of all time. If it wasn't for Frankenstein and Jack Pierce's amazing makeup on Boris Karloff, I would not be making movies today. Like that was seriously the one thing. I saw Frankenstein when I was 5 years old, changed my life completely. I wanted to make monsters. It led me down the path of special effects and movie making and storytelling and being, using my imagination, and that's where I'm at today.
Yeah, yeah, that's really great. Just in case you haven't seen it yet, there's a really great documentary about Boris Karloff on Shudder.
Oh, I've seen it.
Yeah, oh, it's
Yeah.
really good.
I've been very lucky. I got to spend time with Boris Karloff's daughter, Sarah. I've, been to her house and,
Wow.
I remember, when they unveiled the monster stamps in the late 90s, I think it was like 1998. I sculpted a full-size Frankenstein monster when I was at the Art Institute. It was kind of like my final project. I made a life-size Frankenstein. And I remember taking it to show it to her, and she loved it so much. And she asked me, she's like, Fred, she's like, would you like to come up to my room and have lunch? I want to show you something. And I'm like, yeah. So we go up to her room, and in her room, she had a TV with a VCR, and she put in a tape. And it was the first time I saw footage from Son of Frankenstein in color. This is before anybody saw it. She was unveiling it at this convention that we were at. And I got to see it before anybody else.
Wow.
And, she's such an amazing woman. And of course, what her father did and her keeping her father's legacy alive. I just been so lucky to be that close to my favorite monster. I've been to Jack Pierce's grave out in Hollywood. I've done, you know what I mean? I've done.
Yeah.
Again, if it wasn't for Frankenstein, I wouldn't be here.
That's really a nice encounter. That's really sweet.
Wonderful.
That's really cool that you've gotten so inspired by a specific piece of art and then been able to not only to use that inspiration to make your own art, but then also like getting to, interact with the people so closely connected to the original. That's really nice.
I mean, Gunnar Hansen, who played Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is probably my second favorite horror movie of all time. He was one of the first people to see August Underground. We did a convention together, and he sat down and watched it. And when the movie was over, he came out and it was just like, Fred, he's like, this is your Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's like, I've never seen anything so brutal and raw.
Yeah.
And, coming from him, those words were just so amazing. Roger Watkins, the director of Last House on Dead End Street, which was another inspiration, called August Underground the Citizen Kane of horror movies. And I was his favorite director.
Wow.
And it was just mind blowing that like, this is my first movie and like my heroes are applauding me about it. And then I have some people say I made garbage and I can make this a better movie, at home. And I get both sides. It's black or white with a lot of my movies. Some people love them and some people loathe them, which is great. I rather have black and white than gray.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious what you think of for example, the American Guinea Pig series, which I assume you've seen, but maybe not.
Of course.
Yeah.
Unearthed is going to be putting out the August Underground movies. So I've had a relationship with Stephen Byro and Unearthed since their beginning. Toe Tag and Unearthed both started, in 2002.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I've known Steven, 20 years.
Okay. Yeah. It makes me curious, like how many different ways people can do this sort of faux snuff film thing. Because I don't know, I find some of them more effective than other ones, but all of them are interesting.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how people like come up with new things to do with them.
For sure. One of the things, George Romero was a hero of mine. And
Yeah.
I remember talking to him over some scotch one time about, what I do, my movies, and what he does with his movies. And, he said, Fred, I might have made a zombie movie, but I'm not, like there will always be other zombie movies. This is what mine is, and this is what it looks like. And yes, it spawned a look and a style of the slow moving zombies and, respect. Same thing with the snuff movies that I did. They've been, replicated, but not duplicated. And again, like somebody, there's going to be other stuff style movies coming out, and all the best to you making that. But mine are what they are, and obviously mine have held up, just like how Romero's have held up.
Yeah.
Because it was so groundbreaking at the time.
Yeah. It's interesting. Earlier you said that the only found footage movie that preceded yours that was, I forget the exact phrase you used to describe it, but that was similar in some way, was the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
And
as a feature, yes, there's been other movies that had little bits of found footage in it, but for a whole movie just to kind of be shot as a documentary style, like a cinema verite style, was really the Blair Witch and August Underground. Yes, there was Cannibal Holocaust.
That was the one I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, but I mean, Cannibal Holocaust jumps from a cinematic movie to documentary footage. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're getting both.
That's
where
true.
Blair Witch is strictly camera turning on, camera turning off, camera turning on, camera turning off. That's what August Underground is. So,
Yeah.
And for August Underground to work, it needed to not be a traditional film. Like it needed to jump from night to day to night, or one day to next month. You know what I mean? That's how videotapes work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's where a lot of found footage movies fail, is because it's all get it right now. There's not that break in between on how, like, okay, well, I'm done filming today. Let's, I got to go on vacation for a week. Now I'm picking up the camera again, and now I'm going to film some other stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good point that I'm going to keep in mind in the future. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you've talked about how you self-fund your movies. I'm curious if you've considered doing crowdfunding at all, because I think there's definitely fans of your work, and given that you sell like these, collector's editions for $50, I think there are definitely people who would effectively like sort of pre-order those.
For sure. Crowdfunding has always been weird for me. We've done like pre-orders to raise money for movies.
Yeah.
But I make movies for my fans. I don't want the fans to make my movies. I don't need to owe you anything. My art is my art is my gift to you. I'm making my art to spread the sickness and give the fans what I think they want from me. And when I have to worry about Joe from Tennessee who puts $80 in, messaging me every day saying, hey, when's your movie coming out? When's your movie coming out? I gave you money. When's the movie coming out? And it's just like, yo, I don't need that bullshit.
All right. That's a fair attitude.
That's really what it comes down to. I'm sure it would be a success if I did it, but it's just something that I rather try to go out there and hunt for my money for the movies.
All right. Yeah. So you said that the projects you're currently working on, you mentioned those, the Frankenstein thing, a wrestling one, and I think you said there was a third one.
Yeah, Pittsburgh Body Removal.
What's that?
That's a movie about the guys in Pittsburgh who work for the funeral homes that pick up the dead.
Oh, okay. So they go to a house where somebody died and pick them up.
Or go to the nursing homes and pick up the bodies, or whenever it's not a crime scene, they're the ones that remove the bodies from the place. So
Interesting.
I actually went and did it to write the script. And Rebecca Swan, who wrote the final interview, she also wrote the script for that as well.
Cool. So those are currently in the like looking for funding stage, or
Looking for funding stage for sure.
okay. Well, I certainly wish you luck with those. They all sound interesting. I'm especially curious to see how you would do Frankenstein, but I'm sure all of them would be really interesting and
Yeah, no.
unique.
The Frankenstein movie is called Monster My Son, and it's everything that I love about the world of Frankenstein.
Okay.
So it's but it's also about three generations of men who put science first and family second.
Hmm.
So
Is one of the generations the creature?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So you have the grandfather who has a legacy in Pittsburgh as one of the top doctors in town.
In Pittsburgh.
In
So is this
Pittsburgh.
going to be like a modern day reimagining?
Well, it takes place in the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, because technology can either bite you in the ass with the Frankenstein storytelling. So,
Right.
I want to do it. Especially when you're trying to steal bodies out of places. Now there's cameras everywhere, and back
Yeah.
in the 70s there weren't. So you're able to get away with a lot of that kind of stuff. So that's why I chose to to put it in a period. But then you have the father who is more of the Dr. Frankenstein type character, who is the top scientist in Pittsburgh. Borderline genius, but he's also a failed husband because of
Mm.
work. He's a failed father because of work. But he succeeds on every level of being a scientist. But when his son doesn't want to follow in the footsteps, as much as he's been bred to be the next doctor, to go to medical school, to have that lineage, he decides that that's really not what he wants to do. Unfortunately, is killed in an accident, and the father has to do what he needs to do to try to bring his son back, but eventually fails. And the movie's about him failing. He failed as a father in life, and now he's failing as a doctor. So it's very dramatic, but yet heartwarming and fucked up, and everything that it needs to be.
All right. Well, I wish you luck with that.
Thank you.
So, where can people find your work? Do you have a social media presence that you would like to point people at?
I do. I mean, I have a Facebook. I'm Fred Vogel on there. I'm sure there's other Fred Vogels out there, but I'm the one that looks like me. I'm also on Instagram. It's Fred_Vogel76 is my Instagram handle, I think. That also looks like me. And my new movie, The Final Interview, you can get at thefinalinterviewmovie.com. And there's also a toe tag website out there, toetag.biz. So I'm out there, But right now, my movies are hard to get. I'm really excited that Unearthed Films will be releasing the August Underground films this year. So August Underground comes out in August. And then August Underground's Mortem will be out in October. And then August Underground's Penance will be out in December. So by the end of the year, you should be able to get all new special edition Blu-rays of the August Underground films. So that'll make a lot of the kids happy getting the sickness. So I'm happy about that.
Will there be anything new that we haven't seen before on those?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of a relationship with Toe Tag and Unearthed. So, nice. Putting out the August Underground films first, and then hopefully, we'll be releasing a lot more of my other titles in the future. So
cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me. And I am looking forward to your future work.
Well, thank you very much for having me.